This will work. Okay. Take a deep breath. Okay. All right, sorry for the delay there. We have everything ironed out and the deal is done on the land. So that's good news. Welcome to tonight's budget hearing, and thank you for those that stuck around. I wish everyone would have stayed around and learn a little bit how the school finance works and how our budget works here at Arrowhead. I'm going to start out. This is just an outline of what I'll be talking about tonight. We'll go over the budget development timeline, a little bit on the school funding formula, talk about Arrowhead's enrollment and the history and our projections going forward. Enrollment drives our revenues, so it's a really important number to us and in our operating budget. We'll go over the revenue budget, the expenditure budget, and fund balances and what that all means and how that's important to the district. Then we'll go over the tax levy, the mill rate, and next steps in the budget process. So tonight is an opportunity for you to hear the budget, hear the numbers in the budget. The detailed numbers, they're actually in summary format in the pamphlet or the document that you might have picked up outside the door. If you would like further details, deep down details, you can contact me and I'll get you any detail, level of detail you'd like on the budget. Budget timeline. December last year, we started working on this budget all the way through April. The administration worked together to put a preliminary budget together that we could present to the Finance Committee, followed by the full board. So Finance Committee approved of it. We brought it forward to the full board in April, and they approved that budget to come forward to this annual meeting of the electorate. In May through October, we monitored the situation. We were still waiting on a state budget back in April. That was finalized on July 8th and signed into law by Governor Evers. So we were able to, up until that point, everything was preliminary. We took a very conservative approach with our budget process, and it turned out to be a good thing because there was $0 increase or zero adjustment to any revenues from the state level for school districts to work with on the revenue limit. There was $0 additional increase provided to school districts on the per pupil categorical aid. Those are two of our major sources of revenues that we had no increase in. The third one, state aid, which doesn't improve our budget outlook. State aid offsets the dollars that we get. So you're going to learn in the program here, revenue limit and per pupil aid are kind of our revenues to work with. And then on the revenue limit, the state will share in a portion of that. They did increase that. And when they increase their share of that revenue limit payment from the state, then that would decrease the local property taxes payment or the taxpayer portion. So I'll go through more of that. You're going to hear that again as we go further. Tonight is our annual meeting. This is the opportunity for the public to see our budget, hear about the budget, ask questions, and approve the budget to move forward. It is an advisory vote of the annual meeting. The board actually is required by law to take action in October when we have our final numbers. We're waiting on 3 numbers. We're waiting on our September FTE, full-time equivalent student count. We're waiting on our October certified aid, state equalization aid number, and we're waiting on our equalized property value number. We won't get those aid and equalized property value till October. And then we can, we'll bring it to a board meeting in October for finalization, and then we'll certify our levy to the municipalities in end of November or end of October, early November. Here's a look at the basic funding formula. I wish that revenue limit authority piece of pie or that circle there, I wish it was bigger, because really that's what it's all about. That's the amount of money we're able to use to operate the school district on. So our revenue limit authority is projected, and this isn't going to be finalized until September, but it's projected at this point in time, based on the information we know, to be just over $23 million. Now, if we take out the general state aids, what is the state going to share in that revenue limit? And that's just under $5 million that they're going to share of the 23 million. And that leaves $18 million for the tax levy here at Arrowhead. This equation, the numbers in it would look quite different for some other school districts. We're considered a property-rich school district. So being property-rich, and they measure that by the property value of the school district divided by the number of students. So we have a high value per student in terms of property wealth. Whereas another district that's very rural, a lot of agricultural land, lower value property divided by the same number of kids would have a low property value per student, and they would get more state aid. So that's why our levy looks quite a bit higher than maybe another district that would have lower property values per student. So that's the basic formula: revenue limit, total dollars to work with, what is the state going to contribute, and the remaining portion is contributed to by the local taxpayer. The revenue limit calculation at the bottom there, it shows how do we get to that revenue limit. We multiply our membership by the maximum allowable per student amount that the state allows us. This number is derived from 1993 when the law was put into place. It hasn't changed much since then in terms of catching up to other school districts. So wherever you were spending in the 92-93 school year, that's the base number that was used to build your first maximum allowable revenue per student, whatever you spent the prior year. Then for several years, that maximum allowable amount, let's call it $10,000, it was probably a little less than that back then, but it increased for a number of years up until 2009 with consumer price index. And so it was a flat dollar increase though, so it wasn't a percent increase. Consumer price index was determined. The state determined, okay, consumer price index is this, you're going to get $179.67 on top of what you had the previous year. And that happened from 1993 till 2009, when there was not any money at the state to be able to support that through state aid without allowing property taxes to go through the roof. So that year it was capped at $200 instead of what we thought we were going to get, $284 that year. So it was brought back down to $200 increase, and then another $200 increase. And then Act 10 came along, and we were actually taking a decrease. And that one was done percentage wise. So that was a 5.5% decrease. For us, it was $560 or so, a loss to the per pupil amount on the revenue limit. And that's an important number. You multiply that dollars times the number of students, and that's how much revenue you have to operate your district with. Long story short, we got a few other small increases going forward. We had plenty of 0 years of increase in that. And now the last two budgets, we had a $179 increase and another, I think it was $175 increase prior to that. And this year, for the 21-22 school year, we had $0 put on that number again. So it's a major number. It's a real important number that any school business manager would be watching and cognizant of in order to be able to know what revenues are we going to have to work with. And then you have to balance the budget or it just doesn't work. So if the revenues don't go up, you just have to manage your expenditures back down, which means looking at teacher FTE, looking at programming, looking at efficiencies across the district, etc. And this top chart is just showing that the gray bar, 88% of our revenues is controlled by these formulas. So one business manager, when I was just starting out, put it this way. He said, it's like you're steering a canoe from the front and the state is steering it from the back. So they control 88% of our revenues. We control about 12%. So we're steering from the front, state's steering from the back in terms of how much revenue we have to operate with. And then of course you manage your expenditures in line with that. Here's to take a look at our enrollment history and the projection. Top chart is the history. 2020-21 is at the bottom of that top chart. The 2086 students is where we ended in September last year. We're projected, we're projecting to be at 2044 in the 21-22 school year. We won't know that until the third Friday count in September. And that's one of the pieces of the puzzle that we're still waiting on before we can truly finalize and adopt a budget. Here's just those same numbers historically, just in a bar chart format. So different look at it instead of a chart. And this is our future. So that bottom chart in a bar chart format. So same numbers as I showed on the previous 2 slides ago, but in a bar chart. So you can see we're anticipating our enrollment to go down. And what happens when our enrollment goes down and you're multiplying by even the same number, maximum revenue per student? That means your total revenue to operate with goes down right with it. Okay, so that's what we're facing coming up here in the future. That's part of the reason we asked for a referendum to replace the $1.7 million in debt payment that was done being paid, to replace that with some additional revenue to fix our infrastructure for the buildings, because this formula doesn't allow it. And so we just asked, can we replace that 1.7? And fortunately, by 60 votes, by a minor 60 votes, the voters of this district said, yes, take care of our buildings. And we really appreciate that. Here's our revenue limit membership. So what I just showed you was our true head count, the heads that are in the seats, the heads that are in the desks every day. This is our revenue limit membership. So what it does is it takes that head count, it subtracts out the kids that attend our school from that live in another district. So those, they attend through open enrollment. We have about 215 of those that attend our school district because they think Arrowhead is the place to be over their district. That's a great place to be on that open enrollment formula. We also have about 64 kids that choose not to go to Arrowhead, that live in Arrowhead district and choose to go to other schools. So we win that game by about 150. We net gain 150 kids because of the quality of our school here. So that's a great place to be as a school district, because it does help on the budget balancing side. Here's the history since 2015-16 of our maximum revenue per member. So you can see in 15-16, we got just about 10,000. That kind of held steady all the way till 18-19. Not a lot of increases. So those minor increases during those years are really attributed to what we call transfer of service. We had some kids come into the district that came with some additional costs that we didn't have before. So there's a calculation in the formula that you can apply for a transfer of service to get those additional dollars to cover the costs of those kids that you weren't expecting to cost more than they than an average or regular education kid or student. In 2019, you can see the increase. This and 2020-21, the increase. Those were approved in the last state biennial budget. The 10,496. Again, a small increase due to the transfer of service exemption that we received, but not because of an increase at the state level. Remember, the state gave us 0 per pupil increase on the revenue limit formula, which is the dollars that we have to operate with. This is a look at where does Arrowhead stack up against the rest of Waukesha County in terms of revenue per student. If you look at this, Elmbrook gets, and this goes back to 1993, remember, wherever you were spending that prior year, there's your base revenue. And then it goes up equally across every district, gets the same amount equally for an increase going forward from there. So Elmbrook at 12,000 per student, Arrowhead at 10,000, just under 10,500 per student. You can see Mequon go down there at 10,000 per student, all based on where you started in 93. Nothing's changed. That's been a long time, right? 93, 28 years already. Is it, did I do that math right? I think so, close to it. Anyway, that generates times our 2009 students here last year. 2009 students times 10,447 equals 20,988,000. So we got almost $21 million of revenue limit authority to work with. If we had those same number of students, 2009 students times $12,000 per student, we'd have an additional $3 million each year to work with. Multiply that by 5 years just for fun. And that's almost $16 million that another Waukesha County district is allowed to operate with on the same student count. Now, granted, they have more students. I'm just using our student count as the measure. So that's the difference within our own county. To level that out, that is the piece of the formula. If you want to go advocate at the state level, that's the piece of the formula that needs to be fixed, is revenue limits. State equalization aid, that works. If you believe in trying to provide an equal education to every student across the state of Wisconsin, then that equalization aid works. But this revenue limit formula could use some work. It's been, I think there's been at least 3 attempts to try to change it, and no will to get it done, because there's going to be winners and losers across school districts in the state if it's going to get done. Just going back to the formula, this is a repeat slide, right? Size of the pie is revenue limit. How much will the state pay is the square. That equals how much the local levy is going to be. Revenue limit versus state aid. I think I've said it a lot already, but I'm going to say it again. Revenue limit is the size of the pie. The state aid is the filling of the pie. So if we could, pizza is actually easier to do this with. Like, you can make pepperoni on half and sausage on the other half. But if you're talking pie, if you could do that with pie filling, maybe you have banana cream pie on a portion of the pie and you have cherry pie on the other portion. I'm going to show you what that looks like. General aids are really purposeful tax relief. So you have your revenue limit, state gives you some aid, it is purposeful relief of taxes. Here's the pie, a wealthy district. Arrowhead looks more like the wealthy district there on the left. About 81% of our revenue limit authority is funded through local property taxes, 18% funded by the state. The other district that I talked about earlier, their pie filling, we got blueberry and cherry here, I guess. Their pie filling is 89% blueberry and 11% cherry. So we don't get any more money. When the state says they gave more money to schools, they said that this year, and they did, in the form of state aid. It wasn't more money to operate with, but it was money to reduce property taxes. So we have the same money. You'll see from year to year, we don't have any more revenue to work with from year to year. It's pretty darn close year over year. Here's the history of our state aid. I said this year we have a total amount of aids of about $5 million projected or just under 5 million for 21-22. And there's our projections going forward in our years 19-20 and the 20-21 school year prior to that. So we've been staying right about that $5 million mark in terms of what the state will kick in toward that revenue limit authority. And the arrow on the right there, the red arrow, is showing as you decrease state aid, you increase your tax levy. So they work together like that, inversely proportional. Here's a look at our revenue limit history. The total bar is the total revenue limit authority. The light blue at the top is the state's portion of it. So you can see what's happened since 15-16. It stays relatively stable. About low 20% is funded by the local taxpayer. It's just where we sit in the formula in terms of wealth per student. Here's a look at our revenue summary. Again, I can give you every level of detail you'd like on this, but I picked out the largest revenues so you can kind of see where do these revenues come from. Our largest revenue is property tax. That was kind of pointed out through the presentation so far. Open enrollment, I talked about that. That's a big revenue for us. $1.7 million we're anticipating for next year in open enrollment. That comes from those 215 kids that come in from other districts because we have quality education here. State equalization aid, that's the revenue that offsets that property tax levy. And then these other two state aids also offset the property tax, the computer aid and the per pupil, just the computer aid and the personal property aid. The per pupil categorical aid is in addition to the revenue limit. So it's a little bit extra, but that's a newer aid developed 6-8 years ago, maybe. And that's become a really important aid too. So if they don't increase that, that's a hit to our operating budget if we don't get an increase in that. And it's become really important. It started out as a small dollar amount per student. Sure, take a question.
Where in the 2020-2021 budget do you reflect the two payments that Arrowhead received from the federal government in the COVID bills that were passed? Because there doesn't seem to be anything in there that reflects that.
Yeah, that's an excellent question. That would fall in the federal revenue, the next line down, the 240,000 that we anticipated this year. Federal revenues, you're going to see it's less than 1% of our overall budget that we get from the federal government. So Arrowhead got the minimum. Every school district got something from the COVID-1 go round. We got $40,000. That was the minimum. You had to get at least 40,000 across the state. So it was based on a Title I formula, which is free and reduced population or lower income economic status. And so we got the minimum amount there. On ESSER 2, the second COVID federal funding, we are only allocated 105,000 so far. We have to calculate our instructional minutes from last year to calculate the remaining portion. I won't find that out till probably October, November timeframe, I'm hoping. So that's where it would fall under those federal revenues. And then ESSER 3 is not really incorporated into that because I don't know what that number is for sure either. So we've got the initial allocation, but again, that's tied to another calculation that needs to be done at a later date. So good question, thank you.
So you're saying that out of the $180 billion,
yeah,
the federal government set aside for K-12 education, by the population of between 5 and 17 years of age, that's about $3,400 per student.
Oh, that'd be nice. That,
Well,
yeah, you're right. But Arrowhead doesn't get that.
well, you're saying we get 300,000 maybe?
We got 40,000 on round one. I anticipate,
3,000 students.
Yeah.
3,000 per student. I thought, right? And we're gonna get perhaps 300,000.
Yeah.
400,000.
yeah, because it's the 90% of it is based on that Title I economic status formula of your student population. And the other 10% is how we're getting the other pieces of the funding.
All the rest goes to poor.
No. I'll give you an example. We know that Milwaukee Public Schools is getting, I think it's about $500 million. They're having a public hearing on how to spend their $500 million. We didn't think it was important to ask for 40,000. We looked for board direction on that. I'm gonna keep going because I know I'm running up against the time here. This is just a look at the revenues in a bar chart format. Where does our revenue come from? 68% from local sources, 24% from state sources. There's the small federal sources that you asked about, just under 1%. And then the other sources, which would be gate receipts, small fees, little local revenues like that. Here's our expenditure summary. The majority, we're a people business. The majority of our expenditures are on salary and benefits. 13.6 million we're anticipating for next year's salary budget, and then the rest of the benefits to add up to a total of 18 million in salary and benefits. You can see that's stayed relatively stable. Open enrollment, we do have an expense with open enrollment. Those are those 64 kids that choose to go to other districts and not Arrowhead. They live in Arrowhead, so we pay for those going out, but we net gain over $1 million on that open enrollment. Voucher payments, this is important. These are property tax dollars of Arrowheads that go to fund private schools. So you pay directly through your property tax. We take that money and we have an expense to go fund the private schools for those vouchers. And right now we're at about 190,000 worth of vouchers. That started out as like 25,000 3 or 4 years ago. And it's been going up and up as vouchers increase. Non-capital objects, that's our kind of our continuing fixed cost piece, along with some of those all other expenditures are a lot of our fixed costs. And then the transfer to special education. Special education funding doesn't fully support the expenditures. So the general fund has to make the transfer out of the general fund over to special ed to make it whole. That fund cannot go into the negative. And so that's the 1.6 million required to make it whole for next year. Here's some cost saving changes that we made to our benefit over the years. Deductible changes, plan design changes, bidding out insurances, premium contribution changes for our staff, some of the things. This adds up to, I added up earlier, I forget what it was, like $2.6 million worth of savings over the last 10 years in some of the benefits. Here's just another look at our expenditures. What did it look like 10 years ago? So the side by side, the top bar, you can see we paid 74% almost in personnel costs. Today, we're only paying about 66% in personnel costs. We've had to be able to balance our budget. We've had to back off on some of the personnel costs. A lot of the fixed costs stay very similar, more in the top areas there. But we had made some personnel adjustments. Yeah, question?
Can I just ask a question on your last slide?
Mhm.
Because that was over the last 10 years. I'm just wondering, how offhand what the cost savings was from last fiscal year to this fiscal year?
We have a zero increase going from last fiscal year to this fiscal year. We added a high deductible plan going into 21-22 school year. So that's how we were able to balance our budget with a zero increase, is by offering that high deductible plan. And so,
Thank you.
yeah.
And on this slide, can you clarify why it's $1,000 so large?
Oh, that's before me. Health insurance carrier change, that was huge. Yeah, that was Act 10 that allowed us to do that for sure. Yeah. Act 10 took $560 per student away from us, right? So now we had to be given some tools to be able to fund that loss in revenue. One of the changes we could make is being able to negotiate health insurance benefits and the Wisconsin retirement system. So it had to be funded some way, and this is how it was done. Yep. Oh, not the question?
Yeah. I
Yeah.
did. On this screen prior, one more back. What's the 5 million in other, all other expenditures?
That's going to be mostly made up of utility costs. So I think of it as a 253,000 function, which is operations and maintenance, capital repairs.
Is that broken down anywhere?
I can get you the detail on that. It's 300, it's purchase services, which is our utility costs, the gas, electric, maintenance, repairs. That's the majority of that, but I can pull that detail for you if you just want to leave your name and number with me or email address. This is a look at union high schools. There's 10 union high school districts in the state of Wisconsin. We're one of 10. And you can see that we are the lowest cost per member, lowest spender of these 10 union high school districts in the state of Wisconsin. It ranges all the way from our 14 million, all the way up to 21, 22 million that some districts spend per student. Oh, what did I say? Oh, yeah, I'm sorry, 1,000. Looks like a big number when I compare it to ours. Not that big though. Here's just looking at all those numbers. I just showed you revenues, I showed you expenditures, and now I'm showing it all in one slide as a summary. Total revenues over the years, this year, going into next year, 21, 22, we're looking at 27.6 million. Expenditures, we balance those in line with those revenues. We know the state sets kind of the revenue marker for us, and then we balance our expenditures with it. So we have a balanced budget going into this year. Last year's budget was actually carryover projects from the previous year. So that's why there was a deficit budget planned of 600,000. We had projects that didn't get completed the prior year that we brought forward into the new, but otherwise that was a balanced budget prior to those projects not being completed. And we did complete them now. Same information, just in bar chart format. Yellow is the fund balance. Red is the expenditure line, and blue is the revenues. District fund balance. I want to take just a second on this. Yeah.
Does the food service run through these numbers?
Not what I'm showing you here. That it's in there on Fund 50. That's the food service. But it,
Why is that flat? If a program is hey, free lunch from 10% of the student body to 100%. How can that stay flat?
the revenue comes from the federal government rather than the students. So
Federal government stay flat.
I'm talking about on our general operating funds. It did, the revenue is under 1%.
So it's not.
It's not including the food service portion of it. No, because that's a self-sustaining fund that has to, if it doesn't make enough money to cover its expenditures, then the general fund has to kick in and fill that bucket. But it is self-sustaining. It does make enough money to cover its expenditures, which is what you want when you're running a food service program. You want that to be break even, maybe make a little money to be able to replace your equipment over time. Fund balance. Really important. Fund balance is a measure of one date and time. When people say we've got 30% fund balance, they're talking about June 30th of the end of the fiscal year. And so we've got a $9.5 million fund balance on June 30th. That's enough money to get us through until our tax receipts. Remember, we're heavily tax based, right? That's where our revenues come from. We don't get those tax receipts till January 15th. We have to get from July 1st of the fiscal year till January 15th on whatever we have in our fund balance. So that goes down to about nothing. In fact, this year and the year prior, we didn't have to short-term borrow. Every year prior, we have short-term borrow. We have that fund balance in a solid position, and we don't want to let that go down. Because it will be, what it does is it allows us to avoid short-term borrowing. We would have to borrow money to make payroll for that December and early January payroll, because we wouldn't have enough if we didn't have enough fund balance to take care of that. So really an important number to maintain that solid fund balance. It also helps about in the middle of the slide here with our bond rating. We're a AA1 bond rating. The only higher rating is a AAA would be the higher rating. And we're one of 14 districts that have that. I'm sorry, there's only 14 districts that have a higher rating than what we do in the state of Wisconsin. So fund balance shows that you are financially stable and you're balancing your budgets year over year, which is the practice here at Arrowhead. And kudos to the former business manager who I've only been here 2 years, but Steve Kopecki did a great job managing this over the years along with the board. Again, just look at the formula. I can't get enough of that formula. I want to make sure you guys understand that. So it is the size of the pie that we have to bring our expenditures in line with. The state will kick in a piece of it, and that leaves the local property tax to pick up the rest. Here's our tax fund tax levy analysis. This is probably more detail than you want, because it's a little easier than this, but the revenue limit levy is the 18.2 million. Total revenue. It's made up of our general fund. We have a small piece of debt that we're paying on. We've got about 4 years left on that. 117,000 a year we pay on it. And then the capital expansion is for capital improvements each year. We always put about 300,000 toward that. So a total levy of 18.2 million. It's down a little bit from last year's total levy. Remember, the majority of that is driven by our revenue limit authority. If we take that 18 million and divide it by the 6.8 billion in property value of the Arrowhead School District, then we get a tax rate after multiplying by 1,000. So multiply by 1,000, we get to 269. So you take the 18 million in levy, divide by your 6.8 billion in property value, multiply by 1,000, and you get $2.69. And what does that mean? That means if you multiply $2.69 times every $1,000 of your home property value, that's the amount of taxes that go to the school district to fund our district operations. And it's down over the last 3 years, even with, in 2021, that's the first year of the referendum. We were at 288 in 2019-20. The referendum included brought us to 273. So thankfully, we were able to replace that debt payment with funding to fund our infrastructure improvements. And we had a 30-year-old HVAC system, control system, that was out of service basically in July, that we're getting replaced this summer, thanks to that referendum, or it probably wouldn't have happened. Actually, I know it wouldn't have happened. Here's the basic calculation. Total levy divided by total property value times 1,000 equals your mill rate. 18 million divided by 6.8 billion times 1,000 is $2.69 per $1,000 of property value is what we collect from the taxpayers for Arrowhead High School. And just another look at our mill rate analysis over the last 3 years. A $264,000 house 10 years ago, back in 2012, increasing with inflation at 1.16% increase per year. That house that was 264 is now 315,000, or anticipated to be that, using those assumptions. And so you can see, as the value of the home goes up, the total taxes due from that home have not gone up. In fact, they've gone down over the years. Mill rate history, we were in the high to mid $3, and we're down to 269 going into next year. I expect that'll probably come down a little lower once we get our true numbers in October. I'm only, in that number is only a 1% increase in the equalized property value. I think it's going to be higher than 1% for going into next year. Here's a look at the mill rate comparison of those other 10, or the total 10 districts, Union High School districts across the state. We're near the bottom there. Lakeland, who had the highest spend per student, has the lowest mill rate. Their property value is very high in Lakeland, very expensive property up there, and a very low student count. So property value, high property value divided by a small student count gets you a lot of property value per student, makes them look really rich in the formula. They don't get much state aid at all, and but they have enough value to spread that levy over. High property value to spread it over, and that's why it's so low there. Next steps, we know the biennial budget was signed into law on July 8th. We're looking for September count, we're looking for October certified aid, and we're looking for equalized property values. With those numbers, we'll be able to finalize this budget and allow the board to certify the tax levy so we can get it to the municipalities for the tax bills that come out in December. And that's the end of the budget hearing. Yes.
Can you just clarify how the current count is calculated, especially attendance in one day of the school?
The membership count, you said. So clarify the membership count. Yeah, it's third Friday in September is what drives your revenue limit for it in formula, and it's actually a 3-year average of the last 3 Septembers. And what is that count on that day? Of residents only. So on that day, now if a student attended a day before, any day before, or any day after September, they're counted. You know, but they have to, if they came on the day after the third Friday count, you don't get to count them in your September count because they never attended the day before. They have to attend at least one day before or one day after. There is a myth out there that you have to be here on that Friday. No, it's at least one day before, one day after, then you get to count them on that third Friday. There's also a second Friday count in January, and that is used to calculate your state aid. But it has nothing to do with revenue limit. Revenue limit is all driven off of the September count. Good question, thanks. Yeah.
Is there any 21, 22 cash flow?
Not in this budget. We just approved that tonight. So we approved,
So what's the impact of it? Will it be in the 21, 22? Or
it will,
future payment?
no, it will show up as a revenue in the 21, 22. So when we get in that October budget, it'll show up as a revenue. I would imagine that revenue isn't going to get spent in this year. We have to make the plans. We know we have some ideas around some special education programming in some of the facilities around that and maybe some other things, but we'll probably park it in the fund balance. It'll help us not have to cash flow borrow until we decide what truly we're going to use. So we'll probably put it in like
It won't drive the revenue limit.
no, it's one-time money. One-time
Money to substitute for something else. What's the substitute?
facility improvements is the plan.
The revenue, the substitute for some other revenue.
It doesn't substitute, it's in addition to some other revenue, right? It's in addition to,
Windfall the board spend. Is that what it really means?
I missed what you said.
Is windfall revenue for the board to allocate on some expense level that aren't in the budget?
Yes, but I would advise the board not to spend that on recurring cost. If you spend one-time money on recurring cost, that one-time money will be gone and you'll still have your cost. So it's got to be a one-time expenditure, like a facility type of improvement that you're going to use those dollars on. You're going to park it until you make a plan for that money. More than likely.
Can you just repeat what the initial question?
Oh, yeah, the initial question was, we're going to have a windfall of money coming from the land sale that we just approved at the meeting prior to this, $2,075,000 for that land. It's been asked at both of my annual meetings, what are you doing with that land? When are you going to get rid of that land? Asked of the board, and the board took care of it this year. So, any other questions? Yeah. Yeah, the dollar amount I'd have to look up. We have 117,000 a year we pay on it. It was a 10-year loan, and I think we have 4 years left of those $117,000 payments. So about 400,000, but it's not. That's principal and interest, so it's not all principal. If that makes
I'll
sense.
just interject that loan was for our design engineering manufacturing center.
Right. So the other debt, maybe you're referring to the debt that was approved in the referendum 20 plus years ago. That debt is completely gone and paid off. That's the debt that came off the books and thankfully was replaced with a referendum in November of 20, but only by 60 votes. We need the public to support these facilities. You look around the conference, we're not the facilities that some of the other districts in the county have. If you look around, we're not where we used to be, and we don't have the revenue to do it without help from the public. So just putting that out there. I mean, the referendum ask was 5 years. You know, it's 1.7 that comes on for a year, goes away. A new 1.7 comes on for a year, goes away. New 1.7 for 5 years. That's it. We're gonna have to come back and say, we may need another 5 years. I don't think we'll get our facility improvements done with $8.5 million. Yeah, that's a great point. The advantage of doing it in that way, what was approved by the voters, is that we're not borrowing $8.5 million today, paying interest costs on it. We're using it as it comes in. So, yeah, question.
Well, they're concerned about being able to get the facilities done that need to be done. Why hasn't that $300,000 for capital budget changed?
We use a lot of our yeah.
It would have made sense to have started to put more money in there, maybe had to cut costs someplace else, instead of saying, well, we're gonna spend $8.5 million, and that's still not gonna be enough.
Yeah.
But that number of 300,000 is still the same, and it has been the same.
Yeah, and what that 300,000 doesn't show is what we spend on our general fund in terms of maintenance and improvements too. So I know the board has put millions each year into that. Now this past year, we've got about another 300,000, so there's about a total of 600,000 in capital improvements in addition to the referendum dollars. But it just, we're gonna have to cut programs or staff to be able to fund facility infrastructure if that's the mode we wanna go. And then, so it's this or that, you know.
You're gonna have to cut staff anyways, if you look at what your enrollment numbers are, at some point in time, you're gonna have to cut staff.
Absolutely.
Around that.
Right, and so if your enrollment goes down 30 kids, that's not an automatic staff member, because you don't know
No,
what
I
classes.
understand that.
So-
You don't know which grade they're coming out of, you don't know which
Right.
classes they're coming
And
out
if-
of, I understand that.
Yeah, and if you look at the projections, it's about 30, 40, 50 kids a year projected. Hopefully that'll level out and it won't be like that. But yeah, definitely we have to manage that within the student count for sure. Good point. Anything else? Yes.
The cost of lending on that 117,000 a year per year.
I think we got that at about 2%. It was 10 years ago. It was through the state trust fund loan. Dollars. Well, I can look that up and get back to you with that. Just give me your email address, and your name, and I'll shoot that over to you. I can give you the whole debt schedule. I'll show you the principal and interest.
When I make that comment, is maybe some of that 2 million would be used to pay that debt off.
It's a pretty low interest rate. Something to consider for sure, but yeah, like I said, there's 4 years left. I'll look up the interest cost. It's not much interest left on it. You know, the interest was paid on the front end, really. We're in the back years of it now. Okay. All right, I took enough time. I'm sorry. It's 7:50 and this was supposed to go to 7:30. So now it's on to the annual meeting. This is your meeting.
Thank you, Jeff. Very good presentation. At this point, we're going to go ahead and open up the annual meeting. At this point, I will act as a temporary chairman until a chairman is elected to run the meeting. And until that happens, please join me in the pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Okay, at this time, we need to elect a chairperson for the board, for the annual meeting.
I second it.
Okay, Kent Rice has been nominated to chair the meeting. Are there any other nominations?
I nominate Tim Wanger.
Okay, Tim Langer has been nominated to run the act as chairman of the meeting. Any other nominations? I'm sorry?
Third, Tim Langer.
We'll only take one nomination. Thank you. Any other nominations? Any other nominations? Any other nominations? All right, nominations are closed.
I think we need to know the address, name and address of the motion makers.
Oh, we need to know the name and address of those making the motions for the minutes.
I'm Chris Manley.
Okay, Chris Mailing nominated Tim Langer.
I nominate Chris. I nominate Tim.
Bob and Joey nominated Tim.
That's 279 North 7476. Summer Court. Heartland 53029.
If your address is on the sign-up sheet, we don't need you to recite that. But if it is not on the sign-up sheet, then we need your name and address.
Okay, I'll put it on the side.
Perfect, thanks.
Right. So nominations are closed. We will take a showing of the hands. Now, again, only residents of the Arrowhead School District are allowed to vote on any of our motions, okay? So those in favor of Tim Langer, please raise your hand. Kate, you want to tabulate, or Jeff?
Keep your hands up.
Give him up. Did you get the two over here?
Oh, I'm sorry.
We got 25.
So 25.
25, all right. Those who can't rise, please raise your hands. Easier to count. 4. Tim, you have the mic. Have an agenda? Okay.
Thank you, Ken. I appreciate all the work tonight. I know it's not been an easy series of meetings, and I appreciate the work very much. Thank you. Well, thank you. I'm flattered. I think my job's pretty simple here, right? Had our treasurer's report, and the questions for the treasurer have been received. Does anybody else want to offer a question for our treasurer before we move on to other business? Seeing none. I think seeing none. I'd ask our superintendent or Myra to review the school year 2020, 2021.
Happy to. What?
You
Leave
can-
another.
you sure can.
Thank you. This is I know the numbers are really exciting and fun, and Jeff thoroughly enjoys all of it. Some of us are math people and enjoy it too, but I feel like I have a really enjoyable part because we're going to be celebrating the last school year. The vision of Arrowhead. Arrowhead will be an educational leader in creating pathways for students to embrace the opportunities of tomorrow. And our mission here at Arrowhead is to empower students to be engaged, confident, continuous learners who utilize the essential skills to collaborate and contribute within the local and global community. We really talk about empowering students because we want them to own their learning. We want them to be successful in high school, but well beyond high school, in whatever they choose to do in the future, whether that's college or future education, whether it's the workforce, we want them successful. We have 4 enduring goals in our focus plan, which is another term for strategic plan. And these enduring goals have been in place for multiple years. And then there are strategies that change on an annual basis related to preparing students for success beyond high school graduation, fostering and nurturing positive learning culture at Arrowhead, communicating effectively, and advancing our facility infrastructure and technology support for students. Those are goals that probably should be in place for as long as Arrowhead is in place. Jeff has gone over a lot of fiscal information, so I will just touch on over the last dozen years, we've reduced our budget by over $5 million. He talked about the Moody rating. Our AA1 is better than approximately 90% of the districts in the state. While our fund balance is healthy at over 30%, it has needed to be used for recent one-time improvements. Employee benefits changes since Act 10 have resulted in nearly $3 million of savings. Our property tax bill has decreased for several years in a row. And despite our increasing operational costs, our per pupil expense remains right about the same as state average. You've seen this information already in terms of the other high school districts. And Arrowhead has less revenue per student or less taxing authority than any of those other 10 high schools. Our mill rate is the 2.7 or $2.73. And so to compare with Union high schools where it's just the same 4 grade levels, that average for the others is $3.42. The Wisconsin average mill rate is $9.18. And to have a more apples to apples comparison, we would take Arrowhead's mill rate, which is just 4 grade levels, the K-8 districts. We took the average of the K-8 districts, which is $7.29 plus Arrowhead, or including Arrowhead. So Arrowhead and the average K-8 district has a lower mill rate than the Wisconsin average by a pretty good deal, pretty good portion. And then to compare in Waukesha County, you've seen these amounts already. Jeff explained we receive almost $1,600 less per student than the highest spending district, which means about $3.2 million a year that Elmbrook, for instance, is able to spend in their district compared to Arrowhead. Arrowhead, to put it in perspective, we had to go out for a referendum and beg for 1.7 million a year. And we're thrilled to get that to help improve our physical facilities. And Elmbrook has 3.2 million every year without needing to go to a referendum. So as Jeff had mentioned earlier, these spending rates that were set back in 1993, the high spending districts were locked as high spending and the frugal spending districts were locked at frugal, and there's been no evening out of that. Jeff also talked about the property tax. On your property tax bill, the Arrowhead portion doesn't all just come to Arrowhead, and we have it outlined. He had talked about the voucher programs. There's also private special needs scholarship vouchers, private school transportation contracts, and Milwaukee Charter School program. On your tax bill, it says Arrowhead, but those are going to private schools. And then also with federal money that comes in, there's equitable services. So the public schools need to share with the private schools in their region. For Arrowhead, last year was almost 36,000. We're projecting close to 42,000. So altogether last year, $365,000 that was named Arrowhead on your tax bill went to private schools, and we're projecting 380,000 for this year. Now you've heard a lot about finances, how we're not spending a lot. We have less money coming in per student, but now I'd like to show you the academic achievement. Yes, question.
I'm curious why we're paying for the Milwaukee Charter School program. I get the other ones, but why are we getting any money towards the Milwaukee Charter?
I believe every school district in the state contributes to that. So it's a reduction of our state aid. I shouldn't even say contribute because that makes it seem like it's a choice. It's a reduction of our aid that goes to Milwaukee Public Schools. So although we're low spending on our students, our academic achievement is incredibly high compared to other school districts in the state, for sure. And then I have a comparison here with our districts in Waukesha County. So you can see our ACT, the average composite for our seniors. And I should comment, these are 2020 data points because this is what's available to the public through the Department of Public Instruction website. So they're always lagging a year behind our class that just graduated, 2021. We just don't have that information from the state for comparisons. So every annual meeting, it's lagging a year, and in some cases 2 years you'll see coming up. So our ACT is incredibly high for the seniors graduating. A few years back, they made the ACT a mandatory state assessment for juniors. So all of our juniors take the ACT. You can see for both seniors and juniors, we were highest or second highest in our county. Our advanced placement exams, we are regularly the highest in the county by a pretty healthy percentage. AP exams are advanced placement classes. They're the exams that students take in college level courses here in high school. So if you're a child or you hear about grandchildren or neighbors talking about AP classes and they're tough and they have to study and That's very true. They are college level classes taken in high school. And the assessment given is the same exact test given across the entire nation on the same day to prevent any sort of sharing of information. And I would just note, Wisconsin has a law that we cannot start school until September 1st or later. Most states don't have that law. They start across the country more like middle of August, around this time of year. And where that has an impact is advanced placement. Those students, all the kids are taking the test the first and second week of May. And if you're in Georgia and your school started 2 weeks earlier, maybe even 3 weeks earlier, those kids have an extra 3-week advantage of learning. But yet we still, our students are great. Our teachers, I'm so proud of them. So that was 2020 information. Because this is just Arrowhead data on AP exams, I can share these scores from just this last spring. There were 1,310 exams given. The average passing rate was approximately 84% with a score of 3, 4, or 5. 5 is the highest score you can earn on an AP exam. If you earn a 3, 4, or 5, it's considered passing, and you also can earn college credit for those tests. The reason I have some X's here are because if the number is less than 6 students, it could be too easy to identify who the student is. So for instance, let's say the Chinese exam, 1 student took that test, or 2 students took that test, it would be easy to say, John Doe earned 100%, or John Doe and Jane Doe must have both earned 100%. So that's why the X is to protect confidentiality of student data. And then some additional data that we pulled from the DPI website to share. Our graduation rates are very high. I have state average there for comparisons. 2019 is the most current information that we have from the Department of Public Instruction for the official count. About 90 or 81% of our population goes on to post high school enrollment, so into education after high school. Of those enrolling, so of the 81% of our population going on to further education, 90% go on to a 4-year school, 9% go on to a 2-year school, and then there's some students that take classes at both levels. Compared to the state, that's very high in terms of future education. Our attendance rate is very high. Our discipline rate is very low. And now several slides of some highlights. We're going to start with some academic highlights and recognitions. 71% of last year's graduating class earned a cumulative GPA or grade point average of 3.0 or higher. US News and World Report again named us as one of the best high schools in the nation and a top STEM school. Washington Post named Arrowhead one of the most challenging high schools. Our Wisconsin Accountability Report Card, we might have been the highest high school this year, or very close to the highest in that DPI ranking at 89.7%. Significantly exceeds expectations as the highest level. And Arrowhead had 13 National Merit Scholarship semifinalists of just 16,000 across the entire country. One of the things that's important at Arrowhead beyond academic success is character building. And that starts in the families. That primarily happens in families. But at a school, we feel like that's important here too. So we teach the Arrowhead way. We try to live it with our students. And one of the ways that's important for kids to understand is giving back, giving to the community, helping others in need. It's a win-win situation. Our high schoolers learn and grow when they're giving to the community, and obviously the community reaps some rewards there. So just 2 examples of many projects. Our soccer teams raised over $5,000 to support for the Rally Foundation in Gus Frank's name to help fight bone cancer. And they're proud and serve as mentors for Gus. Student Senate and National Honor Society both ran multiple food drives, and over 2,000 food items were donated to 2 different local pantries. Clubs, classes, athletic groups, all together, our students volunteered with over 80 projects and contributed over 5,000 hours. Normally, in a normal year, these numbers are actually doubled. With COVID last year and a lot of places not allowing visitors or helpers, it was actually less. And I would contend that these numbers that were half as much of what we usually do is higher than any high school that I'm aware of. Those projects included everything from girls volleyball, sewing and donating fleece blankets, to the Women's Center, to DECA creating 350 cards for seniors in senior living centers that, remember part of last year, seniors were not getting visitors. You saw just heart-wrenching pictures of people looking through windows at each other, at grandma or grandpa. So our students tried to make their day a little happier by making Christmas cards and other holiday events. Arrowhead loves our veterans, and normally I can stand here and say, here are 6 or 7 different projects we did or events for veterans. Again, because of COVID, we were unable to have any in-person events, but we still found ways to honor our veterans. And there's a picture there of students all writing thank you cards to veterans, why they're thanking and who they're thanking, who they're recognizing in honor of. Could have been a relative or a friend or neighbor. Even during the pandemic, the show must go on at Arrowhead. Vocal music held both in-person and virtual concerts. Instrumental music found creative ways to practice and perform throughout the school year. The beginning of the year, when we weren't sure if COVID was going to spread or not, they were outside. Drama and musical performances were fabulous, even though there were masks on, and some of the masks were clear, so you could still see it, facial expressions, and visual artwork was impressive as ever. Athletic highlights. We had 2 teams that won state championships, our boys alpine ski and track and field. Alpine ski, I'll mention, I think it was the 6th year in a row that our boys have won, which is really impressive. And then state runner-up, so 2nd place at state, girls gymnastics, girls lacrosse, boys soccer, girls golf, and girls swim and dive. So congratulations to all of them. And then I always feel what's important is it's great to win the shiny medal balls and awards and trophies. But what kids take with them long-term is sportsmanship and what they learn from a teamwork, and leadership from their coaches. Sportsmanship is incredibly important here. And this last school year, the Classic 8 Conference awarded Arrowhead teams with the Sportsmanship of the Year award. So boys cross country, girls basketball, ice hockey, and softball. So congratulations to all of them. Some more co-curricular highlights. We had dozens of students that had their fiction, nonfiction, poetry, writing win awards and be published in various actual publications. So they're published authors. Co-curricular performances were held in person and live streamed for audiences and participants, and students learning through virtual options. They still were able to participate in clubs and different co-curriculars. So even if a student had to learn virtually last year or chose to learn virtually, they could still participate in co-curriculars. Just a few staff recognitions, and I'm looking at Mr. Platchik in the back as he walked in. I thought, oh, he's going to see his face on a slide. And congratulations to Jake, who was named, earned a Herb Cole Fellowship recipient. He earned that honor from teachers across the whole state. So Jake earned $6,000 for himself and $6,000 for his program here at Arrowhead. Coach Mike Mulrooney celebrated 41 years at Arrowhead as a head coach. He also had been a math teacher and assistant coach, and he decided to retire this year, so we wish him the best. And then every year we choose some teachers of the year. I shouldn't say we, it's a school board and community committee. And this year, through nominations of students and peers, staff members, Katie Herman, Ms. Katie Herman, Mr. Gustavo Chaviano, and Kristen Faulkner were all named teachers of the year. And then wrapping up, our school would not be what it is without the community that we have. We have an incredible number of volunteers, donors, supportive community. You are the solid base, you're the foundation of our school district. The Arrowhead Scholarship Foundation, volunteers that run this association or foundation, they awarded $75,000 in scholarships to 88 students this year. And then during last school year, thousands of dollars were donated by generous individuals and organizations for our school for different projects and initiatives. And just some of those examples, the Mullet Ice Center and hockey families reaped rewards of donations. Our athletic and co-curricular clubs, graduation celebrations were done through volunteers and also donations. Design, Engineering, Manufacturing Center and Fine Arts programs all received donations. So thank you to our community for that. And then we'll wrap up where we started. Our mission again is to empower students to be successful now and in their future. We will be focusing on college, career, and life readiness through academic rigor, social, emotional, and life skills enhancements, positive learning culture, integrated technology to support student learning, and academic and career exploration for students. We will also focus on support students for individuals in areas of academic, social, and emotional needs. We have a keen awareness that as a result of last school year, some kids were in person, some kids were virtual. It was a difficult school year for instruction and learning. We have to pay attention to that in terms of academics. Do we need kids to catch up? Do we need to slow down the curriculum? We have to watch for that. We also have to watch for social emotional needs. Some families and some students went through a very hard time with COVID and it's not over. So we'll keep an eye on that in terms of what support can we provide for students. In fact, we have some students that maybe didn't have any in-person learning last year and they're coming back this year, which is awesome. But after not being with other students in a classroom environment, that might be a stressor for them. So we'll be paying attention to that and putting strategies in place with teachers, counselors, our whole student services team. And we'll continue to prioritize responsible project planning and spending of the referendum funds that were trusted to us by the community. We have a referendum webpage. If you go to our website and look at the About Us tab, look over to the middle of the page under School Board, you'll find a page that's related to referendum. And there you can watch, you can track our spending. There's a chart where it shows each year what we're spending, a description of the project. You may be able to click on the project and see more details. We want to be very transparent in spending that extra money that you've granted to us. And that concludes my presentation of celebrating the 2020-2021 school year. Thank you.
Before we move on with the agenda, I just want to offer a very specific thanks to Laura Myra for the good work that she's done over the last year in times where we are making decisions as we go. And not all of them are perfect or correct, but mostly they are. Our school stayed open every day last year. Our kids had an opportunity to learn within the walls of Arrowhead if they so chose. And we had staff prepared to teach them remotely if they opted in that direction. I personally am so proud to be affiliated with an organization that can take on a challenge like that, unanticipated and undreamt of, frankly. And I think our staff deserves a special recognition, maybe even round of applause for the good and hard work that they did this year. And I think I'd be leaving out a significant part, maybe the most important part, if I didn't thank our community members that arrive at our board meetings and offer their views and provide us with encouragement to follow a vision that each of them perceives. If you've been to some of the recent board meetings, you know that not everybody's singing from the same hymnal, but we're listening to everybody. And we do our best to try and take what's good from each person and implement it or recognize it as part of our decision making. And so thanks to each of you for being here tonight. That's it's a compliment to yourself that you would show an interest in sitting and listening to an accountant and a lawyer and a school superintendent talk about their view on education. So with that said, we will open the floor to old business and entertain any questions for
Next thing is the procedure set the annual meeting date.
oh, I'm sorry. I skipped right to the good stuff. Okay. Then I'd entertain a motion to allow the Board of Education to set a date and time between May 15th and October 31st of 2022 for the next annual meeting.
So moved.
I have a motion and a second. I can't imagine there's any discussion on this. All in favor? All right. All opposed? Then I would say the motion passed. Now we'll open the floor for discussion. If anybody has any questions about our operations from the last year or what we have going on presently. And seeing, yeah, Chris. Can I do this?
Okay, I got two microphones. So I would like to, I don't know how many of us know this, I did, and I can't take credit for this. My girls, I don't know how they figure this stuff out, but they do, because, you know, our kids are very connected. But in the point of view of being excited about what Arrowhead children go on to do in the world, I'd like to read this statement. UFA Russia, Arrowhead High School graduate Keegan O'Toole won freestyle wrestling junior world championship on Wednesday, August 18th. This is 11 hours old. O'Toole beat a wrestler from Kazakhstan for the gold medal Wednesday morning in Russia. He won the 74 kg division, which is about 162 pounds. So I think that is amazing and deserves a round of applause.
Thanks, Chris. Right? Okay. All right. Yes, ma'am.
I don't know if I need that.
What about you?
I'm good without it. And I'm not sure who this actually goes to. I'm just curious, and the impression I got during the budget information was that the district feels that they kind of got the short end of the stick in how the state set the revenue. You know, we have less money than per student than in Elmbrook and so on and so forth. And that was emphasized over and over and over and over and over and over again in the budget hearing. And then I see all these amazing things up here that we have one of the highest ACT scores, we have the highest AP passing exams, have wrestling students who are world champions. So I'm just curious, if we had more money, what else do you think you would be able to accomplish? It seems like you have low discipline rate, you have students attending school, you have students getting good grades at school, you have students going on to higher education of some sort or skilled trades. You have a state-of-the-art STEM area in both And while our athletic facilities may not be on par with where everybody else's is, it doesn't seem like it's hindered us. We have 2 state champions, we have 6 teams, I believe it was, that were state runner-ups. We had, I think it was 5 or 6 teams that won the sportsmanship awards, and you didn't have up there how many of those were conference champions also. So I guess I'm just kind of curious, it seems like the money that's here with the support of taxpayers, both as paying money and being parents who have children here who are invested in their children's education, that you have outcomes that outpace everybody else. So where would you see the need for the additional dollars that seem like it kept coming up over and over again, that because of how it was set in the 1990s, we got the short end of the stick there, and it seemed like, you know, the impression being we're kind of limping along and we're really having a hard time making our budget work, but your outcomes are outstanding. So I'm not sure where the need is for the emphasis on, boy, we really could use more money. So again, I don't know who that goes to. I don't know if you can even answer it. I just find it kind of curious that it appeared to me a great emphasis on, boy, we just don't have enough money. We need more money to be able to do this. And then I see this, which is phenomenal and speaks to not only the staff here at the school, but also to the community and the families and the investment they make in their children. But I'm just wondering, that to me is a bit of a disconnect.
So I'm going to offer our staff a chance to address that, but I'll address it directly. The building that you're sitting in right now is almost 50 years old, and it has been maintained in an excellent way. One of our former board presidents made it his Joe LeBlanc, made it his personal passion to make sure that we were steps ahead of the next potential roof leak or HVAC failure, and yet stuff gets old. And when it gets funded by referendum like it was in 2000, you have a lot of things failing simultaneously. And so you sort of have this tidal wave that it would be foolish to fix stuff that isn't broken earlier, but it would sure flatten the curve. And so when you saw the referendum pass this last go around, with my support, which is a rarity, I can tell you that the opportunity to support referendums has come up in the past. This one I voted for. It was a critical requirement because at that point we were going to start taking educational opportunities out of our kids' hands and minds and start putting it into bricks and mortar and air conditioning units and all sorts of things that no kid ever learned better because of a great air conditioning. But they sure have lost out when the money for that air conditioning unit had to come out of the classroom. So I would say this, almost a third of everything we spend goes into facilities, and these facilities have constant needs, and those needs are really kind of peaking at the moment. And that referendum that was approved by many of you, it was a godsend at that point. As to the needs outside of facilities, I guess I would offer our superintendent an opportunity to talk a little bit about where we make decisions and where we have to tip the scales in one direction or another.
I think something that you lost is the thing of back when I was here, and seeing that still from back when I was here, 76. I mean, it's not fixed, and there are a lot of improvements that need to be done to help our children in the classroom, and I think it is a great thing to express that is doing more fun coming in to help improve you so that it's not taking away from opportunities from our kids. And different programs, special programs that are different, and unfortunately, in this day and age, I feel like now our kids need more attention and help in a lot of things. And I feel that having better experience, such as, whether in classes,
computers or equipment, whatever it may be, I feel that seeing what I saw back then and now, it needs to be fixed. Because I have 3 kids here. And it's just, it's sad to see, and it's sad to see the improvement in other business, and feeling improving our friends that are great, to help our education. So I feel that it is the next thing that girl has definitely, especially in the classrooms for our children to further and increase improve. I would love to see that. Doesn't even happen. Yes, there are great things and also, but to really.
And I don't know that I can say much more any better than that or what Tim had shared. I'll just, I guess, summarize it by saying for the last 10 to 12 years, on average, we've spent about $1.1 million on physical facilities, and we're just not keeping up. And so we're at the point, when we have these day after day after day budget meetings administratively to try and come up with, here's priorities, here's what we recommend increasing, here's what we recommend cutting to go to the school board. We have picked all the low-hanging fruit, and now we're getting into programs, things that directly impact students' education or co-curricular opportunities. And that's where we've hit the level where it will impact education, it will impact classes. If we have to put money into roofing, HVAC units, technology infrastructure, we're at that point. And that's just talking about things that are breaking and falling apart, not even the classroom upgrades. We have some classrooms that are fabulous. Our design engineering manufacturing center that was built just 5-6 years ago now, it's wonderful. We have science labs that look the same as they did in 1970, and it's hard to function in the room. It's hard to give the same educational experience in some of the rooms, like labs in particular, that are so outdated, so old. They're not being prepared the same as neighboring communities for when they get into college or when they get into the workforce. That's where we have to address the spending. We can't not replace a roof that's gushing water, but the money has to come from somewhere, and we're at the point where it comes from education now.
Thank you for your question.
It doesn't regard that, it's just some of the stuff we were talking about earlier, especially with all the achievements, those are outstanding. As far as the emotional needs for our kids, for the upcoming school years, that's something we really need to address. Talk about teachers really need to be included in the emotional needs of these kids. Those emotional needs are also dealt with by the parents, primarily by the parents. I'm asking the school and the school board, you have to be transparent. You have to come out and talk to parents, and allow parents to talk to you. You need to know what's going on in the schools. Those decisions that are being made last year could have been adjusted, and some of the decisions that were made affected those kids. Those should have been addressed with parents. The school board, we don't make decisions for our children. We vote the school board in power for us. You work for us. You don't work for the administration of the school. Come to us. Our kids are in trouble. Our kids are having problems. Our kids are having emotional trauma because of certain things. Might not seem like a big deal to wear a mask or whatever it might be in your eyes, but it does. It has a huge effect on these kids. So the upcoming school year, I'm asking the school board to be more transparent and allow the parents to come in. See more parents coming into these meetings. There's a reason why more people came in probably tonight. We want to know what's going on with budgets. We want to know what's going on with the school. Last year was horrible. We don't want another year like that. We want some adjustments.
Thank you very much.
Do you have some examples of what you're referring to about some of these bad decisions? Because we haven't heard what you're talking about. There is not a person on this board or in the administration that has anything but the best interest of our students at heart. Period. Simple. Our teachers, I'll tell you this, just a moment. Our teachers have worked their tails off this year. They've had kids in class, they've had kids where they've been teaching remotely. Today, they've got 10 kids in class and 5 remote, and tomorrow they got 12 and whatever. Constantly changing. Kids can't see each other's faces because of masks. The teachers can't. There's a lot of things that the teachers would be able to read that if the student is having some issues, they can't see that. Students can't see the facial. I mean, there's just a lot of, this has been just one horrendous year for everybody. I mean, the number of hours our teachers were working, I'll tell you, they are so proud of this teaching staff for what they did under the conditions that they had to deal with. It's just incredible. We're one of the few schools in the southeast of our state that was open the entire year.
Congratulations. Thank you. And I appreciate all the hard work. I'm not saying this doesn't go to everybody out here. It doesn't go to all the staff. My kid got onto an online class one morning. All right. He sat there for an hour. I walked into the room. The teacher's sleeping. He never had a class. This is the school he goes to in this district. Okay. Good example. There's all kinds of examples. I'm not saying there wasn't a lot of hard work going on in the school district. That's great. But the trauma is when you're seeing all the good stuff and all the hard work.
Oh, we're seeing more than that, trust me.
Okay, well, you're bringing up the good examples. I'm bringing up stuff that needs to be fixed. That's your job. Okay. And I'm bringing it to you as a parent. All right. Just because you've been on the board for however many years, it doesn't mean that, somebody that's been on for 3 months isn't coming to us with any less problems or solutions. Okay. The reason why people are coming onto these boards and coming to these meetings is because they want to know what's going on. They want transparency. I don't want a repeat of last year. Okay. It's affected my kid drastically, and he's hard to identify sometimes. I don't want that happening. All right. I can give you example after example after example. We'll do that over the next few boards, I'm sure, because I'll be there.
And can I get your name?
My name's Trevor.
Trevor. I know we've met before. And I appreciate the calm, respectful exchange on all sides. That's why we have open meetings and have public comments during regular meetings. It's also why I think almost every board member reads pretty much every email that comes in from the public. I know you don't get consistent replies because as we get into a discussion and start joining in with one another, we're suddenly vulnerable to charges of violating open meeting laws. And unfortunately, those aren't charges that just are modest things we get from the district attorney's office. But I would say keep the emails coming. Come to the board meetings. We like seeing you there. We like having conversations with adults who can appreciate that we don't all have the exact same ideas about things, but we're better off when we understand where everybody's coming from. Before I move on, Trevor, did I have anybody on the board or staff who would like to respond?
Kind of, you just mentioned how difficult it was for the teachers and all of that, and I do commend all the hard work that they had to do this year. That it wasn't easy for anybody. You brought up a point, however, that it was very difficult for them to see the students' faces and vice versa. And why was it so hard for us parents needing to be coordinating time and time again, asking and expressing the emotional problems that were happening with the children, problems that were happening with the children, and we were just shut down, nothing was done. It was like a battle. We felt like we weren't being heard. And I'm gonna say one more thing about not feeling heard. It is very frustrating. You send out emails, and I know you made it clear that you do not respond to copy and paste emails. Parents are writing well thought out emails and getting response from only 2 board members. Nothing from the superintendent. Do you see how frustrating that is? We feel like we're not being heard. We feel like we're not being, our concerns are not being addressed. And you see how that is building up. You could see it tonight. I don't understand why you can't reply to emails. Because I know you have replied to emails. Because I have been going through open records. And last June, when there was issues with one of the students, and a lot of the issues with the race were brought up, you received a lot of emails. Now, it is correct that you did not reply to copy and paste emails. That I will give you. But there were emails that were well written out, and they got replies. Not from everybody, but they got more replies than we're getting. And I want to know why. Why aren't we being heard?
You are being heard, okay? The problem with responding to emails, okay, and I've addressed this as recently as yesterday, I think yesterday or maybe this morning. By board practice, the official spokespersons for the board of the school district are the board president and the superintendent, okay? I typically do not respond to emails from a standpoint that, and I think probably most of the board members for the same reason. The superintendent knows the issues. She's got the facts, she's got the documentation, she's got the access to other resources that we as board members do not have, okay? Problem with starting to respond to emails is you can actually end up with what's called a walking forum, okay, which is illegal. Okay, because you're starting to have, you can actually end up starting to have an unpublished or not
Notice.
unposted notice of a meeting. You gotta be very careful about that, okay? And I have board, I do not want to respond to something and respond incorrectly, misstate something, etc. That's why I let Laura respond to things, because she has all the information at her fingertips. She's here on a day-to-day basis. We are basically volunteers. Okay, we are. We're not professional educators. There's not a one of us in here. Greg has actually done some teaching and kind of stuff, but most of us are not education people, but we've all, everyone in this room has been a student. Okay. Last year was a horrendous year for everybody. I mean, absolutely everybody. Students, I mean, the stories we've heard about some of the students, the problems they've had. Our student services department has been on top of trying to contact parents, trying to contact kids that we know are in trouble. They're having problems in the classrooms. Everybody has worked their tail off. It was I hope we never, ever have a situation like we had this year with the COVID and all the associated issues with it. Believe me, everybody's doing the best we can.
And maybe I can comment just, sure.
You can reply to an email without going in depth. You can acknowledge that you received it. You are acknowledging the concerns, and just let the parent know that you've at least received it. And you're acknowledging it.
That's a very good point.
That is not gonna cause any issue.
That's a very good
And
point.
you say that Laura is handling the responses, no, she's not.
I was on the board at first, and I was never told as an elected official, you can't respond to an email. It was only when I came here that I was told we have certain spokespeople. But I still respond to emails, even if it's someone I don't agree with. I think, thank you for your email. So at least I acknowledge that they sent something. It doesn't have to go in depth. It doesn't have to be worried about open records or a forum or anything. It's just a civil response as an elected official, and we are working for them, and that's what I always remember.
concerned parents. Why did you stop?
I have not stopped. I answered well over 1,000 emails and where I
When?
all last school year.
I'm talking about just the last couple months. You have not responded to it.
Well,
And
I
I'm
get
afraid,
lots of emails that show I do. The other thing is there are times where I will get 4 or 5 emails from the same person in the same day. Likely I will respond to one of those, not to all 5.
But the one I did just for myself, I sent one last week, I waited 3 days, sent another one, still nothing. And I'm reading through emails from last year where you took the time to respond, and like you say, you weren't being real involved, because apparently there's issues with that. I'm just saying, you seem to cherry pick who you respond to.
and so I think maybe what I'll do is I'll have Craig Thompson comment. I know he wants to, but this is a perfect example of what a annual meeting's for. To raise this kind of stuff gives us an opportunity to reflect on what our best practices are. Probably put another agenda item on so we can talk about, you know, whether the rules we've been operating under might be too stringent. And so I think I'll let Craig have the last word on this, and then we'll move on to the next question.
Just very briefly, there are 9 members of this board normally. And if any of us chose to, or say for example, if all of us chose to answer and respond to each email, you could potentially get 9 different answers. And any one of them,
I'm fine with that.
any one of them could be understood to be speaking for the entire Board of Education. That would not be true. It would sow a great deal of misunderstanding, potential misunderstandings. If there were 9 answers to each email, it would be very confusing. So we have chosen to let our president and our superintendent speak for us in most all circumstances, so there is not confusion in the public.
Okay, I understand that,
Yes.
but why can't you just say, some acknowledgement that you received it? And I want you all to know that it's not being handled by the president and the superintendent. So I think all of the board members should be aware of it. I received responses back. They're not, they may not answer my questions or whatever. They may be, just a couple lines just saying, thank you for your concerns, sent you an email. That's sometimes enough. And if you would do that, maybe you wouldn't get 5 emails in a day from somebody, I mean.
So I think your point that you're making is a strong one, and I understand Craig's point of view very much. The responses that I've given to emails that come to me, I really don't answer any questions that are focused on the board. I'm basically politely letting you know, hey, I've read your email. Thank you for reaching out to us. We understand your concerns. We appreciate your time in taking it and relaying it to us, because a lot of this, especially your emails, is very well thought out, very well crafted. There's a lot of thought that goes into them. And I want you guys to know, as people that are hopefully going to re-elect me next year, that I'm listening. I'm not going to make any decisions for this board. That's not my job. I'm one of typically 9. And I think that would go a long way from members of this board. If I can make a suggestion, I know Kent, you pointed out, I've only been here for 5 months. You're right. And so there's many procedural things that I still need to learn. However, I think it would go a long way if any one of us did an email, just to respond and say, hey, thanks a lot. Your thoughts are very well put together, however it's well responded, just so we can kind of start moving forward in a path that's that that we're listening, because we are.
I appreciate it, Kristen. May I ask your name? Amy Anderson.
Thank you.
Amy, how come I'm not getting your emails? I've been sending them to you. I'm not seeing you on my mail right now. When was the last one you sent me?
My name is Sarah. I think this all boils down to what the gentleman in the gray was saying and the last speaker, to accountability. And I know that the board, you know, constantly praises the teachers and the staff and how great they did last year. And I'm impressed by everything that everyone's done. And, you know, for the most part, it was a really great year. But there were some issues, and I feel like every time I bring up an issue, it might be addressed, it might not be addressed, but no one is held accountable. And I think that's even more important than this transparency, which is also very important, but you know, people need to be held accountable, whether it's the school board or the teachers or the staff in any way. You know, whether we're dealing with our kids or the masking issues or anything like that. So that's all.
Thank you very much. Bob?
Amy, I just searched my email. I do not have a single email.
Sending them. I sent it on Friday and I sent one on Sunday. And I also, I mean, I can go back when I was sending them back when we were trying to get masks off the kids. I mean, they've been sent. Aren't they under Amy Jen? No. No. I saw all the names, but close to everybody.
Okay,
Do you have it? Do you have it on your email?
so
What day? And what day?
11:29 a.m. Friday, August 13th.
I don't have anything.
all right, so maybe we can add this to the agenda for our regular meeting for next week. We're gonna talk to a couple other people who have their hands raised.
All right, I just want to say, first of all, I think it's board member 101 that if you respond to an email by replying all, you form a quorum. I think that's a given, right? So you just don't do that, right? But you can respond to a parent or a citizen individually if you want to, and it's right here in your procedures. It's subsection 140, school board members, number 7. Be responsive to the public, maintaining open communication lines with citizens in the community, informing them of educational needs in the district, as well as actions of the board and accomplishments of the district's educational program. Refer complaints to the proper school board authorities and abstain from individual counsel and action. I am amazed that I have to tell you people that individual board members can speak to their constituents via email or the phone or whatever form of communication. You should know this. I know this by just going on your website and pulling this out.
Williams Hunt, Bob is in favor of more. Gerald Litkey, Hartland, Wisconsin. Just want to make a few comments here. COVID's not going away. It's coming back for a rerun this fall. So I hope the board members do the right thing with regard to how they treat the students, the protocols, the masking by choice, not by mandate. And then I want to ask another question from a previous meeting where I helpfully distributed 10 copies of CRT information to the board members. I'd like to know what the board vote on that was, if that's going to be utilized and implemented this school year, or if we're going to abstain from the brain damaged information. Mr. Thompson.
We have a policy meeting tomorrow morning. Which is customary for our meetings. This topic will be addressed again.
That's an open meeting.
Yes,
Where is that?
it's in the boardroom at South Campus at 7 a.m. We have our committee meetings nearly always at 7 a.m. in the boardroom. In the boardroom.
On policy meetings, we generally don't have a public comment as part of the agenda.
But it is on our policy meeting, we are policy looking forward, as you hopefully see. And we will be discussing the possibility of adding a new policy regarding that. Yes, sir.
Just a comment in regard to what Neil Lake mentioned here about the $10,000 a year per student versus 12,000 and whatever. Like there's no question, Arrowhead does a wonderful job with every dollar spent. But then on the other hand of that, you know, we talk about the infrastructure needs here. Nobody can deny that if there's real building is going to need some repair, maintenance, and upkeep. But I think the referendums are the best way and the best system of checks and balances to implement those improvements. And then if you look at other school districts like MDS, I don't know what they get per student, but I'm sure it's $10,000 per week. And they can't purchase anything that's worth buying.
That's Gerald, right?
Yes.
Okay, we're gonna take your picture and we're gonna put that quote there. Our next request for a friend. Not that there's one right around the corner.
They're all grown now, but they all turned out they're wonderful, successful people.
Yeah, thank you for.
My size 10 is the other part. No question, there should be accolades for the teachers.
Thank you, I appreciate you participating.
Yeah, can I just add one thing? You know, regarding that question, I don't think money equates to success, as you have stated, you know, with our scores being so high and everything, but it is all infrastructure. And if anyone wants to learn about what we need and what needs to get done, come to a buildings and grounds meeting, and you will see what needs to be improved and what we're just putting band-aids on. It's very interesting, it's this again at 7 o'clock, very early, but you will learn a lot. And then you'll know what needs to be done, and why that money is necessary.
First Wednesday of the month,
That's done there.
7 a.m. District board, yes.
And I'm not seeing any other hands. Oh, I saw two. All right, and I think we're gonna move on. My screen's gone blank.
We've got 2 questions.
I just have a question to clarify for tomorrow morning. So there is a meeting at 7 a.m. that is not open for any sort of public comment. And what exactly is the policy for meeting, but what is it about exactly? The committee meetings for school boards, not just Arrowhead, but almost universally, committee meetings are where the brunt of the discussion and work takes place. So it's a meeting of the committee that's done in public. It's not a public discussion because it is a limited time. Some people have to get to work. So it's their work session that the public is welcome to listen. So the discussion on whether that curriculum will be implemented or not, correct. It's discussion, and then they may reach a resolution or a consensus that this topic should move forward to the next school board meeting for a vote. It's our regular school board meetings that are typically the second Wednesday of each month, where there is a public comment portion of the meeting. Regular meetings have the comment section, public comments. Annual meetings obviously have public comments, and the committee meetings and special meetings do not. And anytime that you want to know what's being addressed on an agenda, if you go to our website in the school board section, there's an area that's agendas, there's an area that's minutes.
So you can see upcoming agendas, exactly what will be discussed, whether it's a committee meeting, a school board meeting, an annual meeting like today.
I'd like to add the very first topic on the policy meeting tomorrow is discussion and possible development of critical race theory board action items. That's the very first topic.
The other thing about,
What does that mean? Development of a board action item? Is that developing a policy that the board is voting on? How to address critical race theory? If we want to stop it before it ever starts, present other ideas, but that's what we'll be discussing.
not necessarily. The thing is, there are some of these topics that may take several meetings in a committee meeting. Just because something's on an agenda for a committee doesn't mean that it's actually going to go to action item at the board for the next meeting. We've got some things that may take 3, 4, 5 months to develop before all the issues are hashed out, ironed out, and come up with before it actually comes to the full board for discussion and action. So Chris saying it will be on the next board meeting, that's not necessarily true, especially with something like with as many as hard feelings or bad feelings and everything else about CRT, people can't even define it. So it's gonna take us a while to define exactly what we're banning, okay? Because CRT to one person means something entirely different to somebody else and so on. So this may take us a while to actually come up with a policy statement before it's actually approved. So just because it's on the agenda doesn't mean that it's going to automatically be moved on or taken action on the next meeting, depending on how the discussion goes, how the background goes, and everything else for us to develop that policy. The other thing else you got to realize, when we're developing policy, some of these policies haven't been modified for 20 years. We look at them every year. A lot of our policies that are modified because of state laws changed, conditions have changed, and so on. Some of our policies have been in place for years upon years, and there hasn't been a need to change them. Some of our policies are changed much more frequently, depending on what's going on and so on. So you can't just say it's because it's on the agenda, it's going to be on the board for action the next month. Yes, sir.
This will be pretty easy, Pat, because we're gonna help you make that decision.
That's fine. That's fine.
You know,
We appreciate your assistance.
Question just to make clarify things. So I do understand that it takes sometimes longer to work on something. I think what the parents are trying to understand is, will there be a time for parents to then, whether it be the next board meeting or the board meeting after, will there be a time for parents to come and speak our concerns to the board before any?
Regular board meetings, we have open comments every board meeting. Okay, if it's something, I mean, we listen, we don't respond to those comments because typically things that are brought in comments are not things that are on the agenda. Okay, we can't just say, okay, somebody brings up some topic that we're gonna make a motion and we're gonna take action on. It's gotta be legally posted and noticed on our agenda, okay? You've seen what's happened in the last 3 or 4 meetings. I mean, the July meeting, we didn't end with public discussions till 10:30, it says. Okay, we still had an actual board meeting to conduct at that point. We are listening, okay? One of the things that would help with these discussions is to have discussions like we're having tonight, okay? Take the emotion out of it, talk to us. Yelling doesn't help. There's a lot of yelling going on here tonight. That doesn't help anybody, and all does is shut down communication. So please help us. We welcome your comments. We really do. I mean, seriously.
And we really do want to work with you too, we really do. But you tend to shut people down. You shut Chris down, you just. Parents are frustrated, and I really think that there's a solution to this. Showing parents that you're listening, responding to them.
Answering emails for acknowledgement.
Take our concerns seriously.
It's 2 points along that. You know, you say that you want to have discussions, and yet you're told that if we email everybody, that you can't respond to our emails because you can't speak to the whole board and you're worried about being in a forum. So email can utilize to have discussions. There's 3 minutes that you're given before a board to talk, but you're not given any response from the board. So an actual board meeting is not a place that you can have discussion. There is no public comment at a committee meeting. So a committee meeting is not a place that we can have a discussion. So I'm curious as to at what point in time, as a taxpayer and a parent, am I able to have discussion with you, and in what form? Should I be calling all of you and making you voicemail messages to have that discussion? Should I be arranging one-on-one coffees or meetings with you to have that discussion? Because it seems like right now you're telling me in all these other forums, I'm not able to have a discussion. And then my second thing I just want to say, and this is a out there piece of advice, when you put an action item on an agenda that says development of a critical race theory board action item, I read that as a parent, that critical race theory is going to the board as an action item. There is nothing in that item that says we're going to develop a policy, we're going to start a discussion, we're going to start at the very beginning and define what this is so we know whether we want it or we don't want it, and if we don't want it, we know what we're saying we don't want, and if we do want it, we know what we're saying we do want. That item says to me, we're going to have a policy meeting at 7 o'clock tomorrow morning. It's the first time it's going to appear on a committee agenda, and it's going to show up at the board meeting next time, and we're voting on critical race theory. So when you develop these, think about as a parent, how that parent's going to read them. Because I think if you put on there that this is going to be a discussion about how do we develop a policy that encompasses this very divisive topic, you have a different response from parents than you get when it reads, we're developing an action item for the board.
But that doesn't mean that we're necessarily developing it for that next meeting.
Okay,
And
but
it's
it
true, we are
doesn't say
developing.
that.
Not clear.
It doesn't say that. What I'm saying is, I think in light of transparency and the communication, one of the big things you had on your presentation was communication. You're not doing a very good job of it when that's what you put on an agenda for a policy committee meeting.
We'll try to do better on the wording of it.
And
That's what I'm asking. And I'm also saying you
the-
need to provide parents with a forum where they can talk and get an answer to their questions from a board member.
Okay,
You
well,
have
then-
cycled every single place that they can do that.
It's like.
And then you wonder why parents come in here and yell. They come in here and yell because they don't feel like they're being heard in any of the other places that they're trying to reach you to have their voice be heard.
So
Let me offer this. okay?
why don't I answer this just for a second, Ken? Just two comments on that. And the first one's a bad comment, but when you are doing things like establishing agendas and working your way through the process while honoring open records laws and open meetings laws, things like words like action items sort of creep into your vocabulary after you've been into a board meeting, because you know that you can't vote on anything that isn't called an action item. And so when we say, okay, we need to develop a motion to bring forward to the board at some point, well, what we're creating is an action item. And you're right, it's not ordinary language. It's not something that, you intuitively know exactly what we're trying to suggest by action item. And so your suggestion that the agendas be written in more traditional English is heard. The interchange when it comes to discussions between the board and our taxpayers is also heard. We have to operate again with restrictions where if at a board meeting you stand up and want to complain about the striping on the tennis courts and we don't have that on as an agenda item, we're restricted in our ability to address that stuff. And yet I understand your frustration when you're talking to us about something that clearly is on the agenda. Why aren't you getting some direct interchange? Frankly, that's part of the reason that you have an annual meeting, because we can kind of take the bars
I
off.
understand the lack of direct, I understand why you don't have that interchange at a board. I understand. But what I'm saying is, it feels as a parent, there is no place available to me to get that energy. And I'm perfectly happy doing it in the appropriate manner and in the appropriate place. But it appears that's not email. It's not at a committee meeting. It's not at a board meeting. And I'm sorry, but while this is fabulous, once a year is not enough when things are continually changing and things come up throughout the school year. There has to be a vehicle that we can have a conversation and get a response from a board member about what their thoughts are. Because you're each elected individually. We are not electing you to be a cohesive unit that always has the exact same opinion.
So it looks like Amy has something to say, but I don't think we can solve this
I
tonight.
don't suggest
But I have to
this is
say,
an area
acknowledge.
of grievances.
From a few years ago, when I was on the Burke School Board, we had what were known as community workshops, where the board, it was just casual, and people would come in and ask, there was a Q&A. For example, when we were hiring a new principal, the public had a big say in that. And we could, what do they want in the principal?